Okay, it's 6:29, so I think we started at 6:30 sharp. Wade and everyone, do you want to turn on the video all the time, or should we just let the only person turn on the video when it's their session and only turn on all of our videos at the panel discussion session?
Yeah, I think it's better if everyone else turn their video off when someone is presenting. And
yeah.
Milad, maybe correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think when we present, the videos will show up on the thing, and we try to refrain from that.
Yeah, that's my thought. Yichen, please make sure that you turn people's video off when it's accidentally on.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see it's 6:30 and let's get started. Hello everyone, and very warm welcome to all of you in the audience joining from the United States and also around the world. I hope you and your loved ones are all doing very well during this special time. And thank you all for joining us, the Energy Innovation Network Investor and Startup Mixer. Today, we're going to talk about utility innovation trend analysis and post-COVID-19 strategies for startups. I'm Dee, I'm a volunteer at EIN. Also, I'm your host today for this virtual event. First of all, I wanted to go through with you our agenda for today. We are joined by Wade Bitaraf, Head of Energy and Utility Sustainability Practice at Plug and Play. He will share his views on the utility innovation trend in the first part of today's event. And then in the second part, three fantastic founders from three startups in the energy sector will give presentations on their companies and later join the panel discussion to talk about utility innovation and their COVID-19 strategies. We will save the last 20 minutes for Q&A. So we encourage you to submit your questions to the panel through the chat window. And also to help our conversation going after the event, we invite all of you to join us on LinkedIn and Slack. The information is being shared in the chat window. Before Wade's talk, I want to spend a couple of minutes to let you know more about EIN. So Energy Innovation Network is a Silicon Valley based nonprofit organization. We were founded at Stanford University in 2015. We now have 18 core members, all volunteer based. While most volunteers are in California, we also have members in Colorado, Michigan, Beijing, and Shanghai. At EIN, we focus on three main areas, being energy, environment, and transportation. And our vision is to strengthen the exchange of technology, research, business, and policy in our focus areas to advance a more sustainable future. How do we achieve it? At EIN, we host various events and conferences throughout the year to bring people together to share ideas and resources. We have large events like our annual summit. Last year, our annual summit was on US-China energy and climate and AI in energy. Over 200 people joined us and received very positive feedback from the audience. We also have a global Clean Future Influencers series to bring individuals who have made significant impacts in clean energy to share their ideas. Last month, our advisor, also a Nobel Prize laureate, Professor Daniel Kahneman, talked in the series about science and social innovation for a healthy economy. We also have smaller monthly events like the investor and startup mixer you're watching now, and Longchang events, where we invite investors, entrepreneurs, and industry experts to have in-depth talks on the latest technology trends and potential investment opportunities. We always welcome everyone who are passionate and care about sustainability to join us. We also have openings at this point. If you're interested in joining us and knowing more about our events, please contact us using the email below and visit our LinkedIn page or join our WeChat group. Next, I would like to introduce some of our upcoming events. Our 2020 Inspire Summit is scheduled to be on September the 5th. It will be a TED Talk style event, and our guests will be sharing around the topic beyond business as usual, from green swings to green opportunities. We chose this topic mainly because we recognize that climate change will dramatically impact all sectors. And the question is, how can we explore cross-cutting opportunities for the transformation? And the goal of this summit is to inspire cross-field collaborations and critical conversations to a more sustainable future. If the situation allows, the summit will be an offline event in Sunnyvale, California. Otherwise, it will be a virtual event. And the speaker application is now open. We invite you to apply through the link below or by scanning the QR code here, or share it with people who might be interested. Also, on May the 28th, next Thursday, Professor Xu Peng from Tongji University will share his experience from China's reopening after coronavirus and talk about the precautions and practices should be considered and adopted in buildings in the United States. We will also have 2 programs to be launched. One is the education program, where we collaborate with professors from academia and senior executives from industry to offer lectures and workshops on the latest developments and trends, targeting both professionals and students. And the second one is the Women Empower program. It's led by our China team. The mission is to empower women's leadership in energy, environment, and the climate field, and build a platform to connect female professionals. We welcome you to sign up our newsletter for the updates, and please stay tuned. And finally, our featured investor for today's event, Mr. Wade Bitaraf, Head of Energy and Sustainability Practice at Plug and Play, the most active early stage investor and corporate innovation center. Without further ado, let's welcome Wade. I will let you take over the screen.
You're on mute.
Hello, everyone. Hello, and good morning and good evening to those of you watching from the US. I wanted to start off by showing our gratitude to the Energy Innovation Network, particularly Dee, Jing, Summer, and the team for inviting me over today to this great event. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about our perspective of how things are changing in the utilities innovation landscape. And I wanted to also anchor this moment with some data and try to split my presentation in 2 parts. As of today, we passed more than 5 million confirmed COVID-19 cases. And here in the US, we're approaching about 100,000 deaths. So I wanted to divide that presentation today into 2 parts and also talk a little bit about some of the learnings that we've had, working with some of the most successful entrepreneurs and try to share some of the best practices and lessons learned And as Dee mentioned, we'd love to make this session interactive as possible. So please, if you have any questions, share it here in the Q&A box, and we're happy to answer those questions after the presentation. And obviously, I'm looking forward to the presentations by the entrepreneurs in our session today. So let's kick it off. And I wanted to start talking a little bit about the energy industry as a whole. And we think we are in the midst of a revolution in the energy sector, thanks to a lot of changes that has happened in the past couple of decades. Number one, the price of renewables has dropped drastically over the past few years. The governments across different borders are putting mandates for the organizations and the people to reduce their environmental footprint. And the customer's experience are extremely changing and rapidly evolving over time. And then the most and largest buying cohort, millennials, more than ever want to be greener and more environmentally savvy. And our utility partners genuinely want to transform their businesses. And in this kind of journey, they're facing a lot of challenges. And I want to try to kind of put the perspective of utilities innovation in the context of smart cities, because this is one of the latest initiatives in our organization. And a lot of the changes that we see utilities are facing really fits into the framework of the smart cities, depending on the regulatory framework that they're in. So, I'll talk a little bit about the smart cities in the next few slides and why we think this is an exciting space. Over 60% of the world's population is expected to live in the cities by 2050. So that would add another 2.5 billion people to cities, 90% of which are in Asia and Africa. And as you can see, the proportion of the folks that will be living in the urban areas are going to increase as well. We also see tremendous uptick in the investment in smart cities related startups in the past few years. This is a research that's done by Mitsui Report, and it indicates some of the areas that investors, both public and private sectors, are focusing on. And we see a lot of interesting trends in these areas of smart cities, from electric vehicle charging solutions, smart grids, dynamic electric pricing. In the real estate and construction business, we see a number of interesting solutions, from building automations, home security, shared spaces, smart street lights. In telemedicine, we see a lot of technologies that can help with the air quality, lifestyle, wearables, and first aid alerts. In the micromobility space, we see a number of interesting technologies around car sharing, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. In fact, one of our startups today will talk a little bit about their charging solutions, bike sharing, and smart parking. And obviously, a lot of these solutions are driven by applications of data analytics and machine learning that are overarching tools that are used in these areas. So this is the study that's done up to 2018, and we see that the projections for the next 5 years is increasingly growing again. And we see that the expenditure in the smart cities areas are going to continue to evolve. So the numbers and statistics that I'm showing here are indications for utilities and innovation leaders that not only it's a great place for investors to do well, but also a great opportunity to do good at the same time, and have on top of the economical impact, social and environmental impact. And this is a really great space to help improve people's life and reduce the environmental sustainability, increase the environmental sustainability. So for those of you who are not familiar with Plug and Play, I wanted to share a little bit more about what drives our business and what is some of focus areas. Really, the core of what we do at Plug and Play is investing in early stage company from a private family fund in early stages, and really help them and pair them up with some of the key industry stakeholders and investors to help them grow and thrive. And in this journey of matchmaking these entrepreneurs with the corporate executives and investors, we kind of tend to see the both ends of spectrum and try to understand what are some of the biggest pain points and priorities in the corporate world. And we see that the utilities over time have shifted their technology focus areas as their regulations change. So depending on whether they're in a regulated or non-regulated space, utilities play an impactful role in building the smart cities of the future. So for those that are monopoly systems and regulated, like some of those in the US, we see a lot of their focus areas are how to look at the current assets and make them more sustainable and efficient. And on the non-regulated side, like so recently in Japan or in the European markets, we see a lot of technologies that are targeting the future of the energy space as it relates to new business models and technologies at the intersection of transportation, construction, and some of the other adjacent areas. And it's been really fascinating in the past few months observing how their technology areas are shifting towards more COVID-19 related solutions. And I'll talk a little bit about it in the next few slides. But as I mentioned, what we do and what we think we're focused best on is on early stage companies. And here are some of the startups that we've invested in the past few months, and some of the key trends, as I kind of briefly alluded to it in the smart cities areas, are around connectivity, energy optimization, space as a service, electrification of the transportation, smart buildings, urban planning, and connected vehicles. So these are some of the investments that we made in the past few months, and the startups are evolving during this time. You know, historically, a traditional utility, what they would typically look into are some of these areas. As you can see, these are industry-themed innovation practices that we run. So from our vernacular and our lens, these are the areas that we see utilities typically would look at, you know, areas in urban mobility, as I mentioned, on connected vehicles, you know, vehicle to everything, Internet of Things and connectivity. In the energy and sustainability practice, where kind of they're sectored off in the utility space, a lot of energy optimization, smart grids, and smart charging space. So after the coronavirus situation happened in early February, we saw a number of our utility partners approaching us with a completely new set of technology focus areas that can help solve some of their current challenges. So those are some of the areas, as you can see, like in our health and wellness practice, we look at a number of technologies that can help with remote monitoring of the wellness of the employees, with molecular diagnostic, point of care diagnostic, remote patient monitoring, ventilators, drug discovery, and some of the other areas that typically a healthcare provider would look into, but now the utilities are trying to tap into and learn. And obviously, in terms of the workforce management, we see a number of technologies that utilities are trying to implement into their business, from talent transfer to customer success, collaboration and knowledge sharing, legal and compliance, project management, and a lot of solutions around cybersecurity as everything is turning online and virtual, and intelligent process automation. So a lot of tools and new technologies that utilities at the moment are laser focused on, so they can bring into their business and hopefully manage and come out of the situation stronger. Some of the trends that we saw, and in each of these 4 pillars, we've highlighted 3 of the startups that we think are doing great. But in the integrated mobility space, the main questions that we're trying to answer is how can we facilitate the end-to-end journey, citizen journey, to move from A to B. So the point A to B transportation is the lifeblood of all cities. And how can we clear, the need of people-oriented decision-making solutions. And some of these solutions that we brought here and showcased in each of these 3 startups are around managing data, moving people, and distributing resources. In the smart microgrid infrastructure, we really want to see how can we harvest data from smart poles and other sensors, and which new business models are evolving from it. So how can we gather and understand data, harvest information from existing infrastructure, and tangibly make people's lives better. And some of these solutions that I've included here are really better sensing and data management solutions, as well as platforms for smart infrastructure. In the climate resilience, which is really near and dear to our kind of heart and in the practice that we focus on, the question that we're trying to see is how can we use smart technology to make our cities more resilient against climate change and natural disasters. So really, like, how can extreme weather events impact city systems, and how do open data models for public sector is changing these solutions. And of course, as mentioned, some of these solutions are around models for prediction and understanding of weather and climate fluctuations. And then lastly, the fourth bucket that I included here are technologies around construction business. How can we builders leverage the Internet of Things on today's job sites to improve efficiency and safety, and monitor and track some of their equipments, and basically the solutions that have been demonstrated here are automated construction site data collection, visual analytics, and worksite safety, and low-powered sensor networks. In fact, one of our presenters today later will talk about their solutions. So I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and share some of the best practices and lessons learned for the entrepreneurs who are listening today. How can we go through these challenging times together stronger and come out of it? Facing a crisis is never easy, but there are traits that separate leaders who survive a crisis from those who don't. And the first point I wanted to share is how to prepare for disruption. I think the first step is preparing to face a crisis is to be aware of what the larger world is. Some of our startups, for example, in this situation that had China-dependent supply chains, were the first to recognize the significance of COVID-19 threat. So the data was out there, so they started to prepare for it. So they weren't too much inward looking at, themselves, their products, or their competitors. They were looking out on the broader world to see what can impact their business. So really the point here for the entrepreneurs is to look outward and watch for leading indicators that foretell massive change. The second point is survival. Hibernation, layoffs, product development slowdowns. There's a lot of legitimate survival strategies during a crisis, and none of them should be viewed as failures. While doing any of these things is uncomfortable and even scary in a general crisis, all of your competitors are probably doing the same thing. So as long as you survive, you can reinvigorate your organization when the market recovers. So really the punchline here is any type of survival is better than no surviving at all. I think layoffs is one of the hardest and most painful parts of managing the crisis. Immediately and drastically cutting costs and positioning is ultimately better than repeatedly demoralizing and destabilizing your staff with an endless series of smaller layoffs. So some of the most successful entrepreneurs that we've seen, they were able to cut deep early on and allow the remaining employees to cohere and rebuild with much higher confidence. So they kind of try to build this confidence around the organization that, the employees don't feel like they're next if they lay off people gradually. It's also really crucial to make any layoffs with maximum empathy. That's even more true in this COVID-19 crisis, since many people are struggling with health issues as well as economic ones. And people will remember you after the economy picks up. So it's really important to show empathy and kind of transcend this across the organization. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I've seen have a unique ability to find opportunity even amid drastic change. And I think this mindset isn't just for entrepreneurs launching startups. Last week, we saw a company like Clear Labs that was able to successfully raise $18 million and repurpose their genome sequencing technology for detecting COVID-19 virus. And they've done a tremendous job in early traction there. So just to kind of try to wrap it up here in the interest of time, I think each of us has the opportunity to use a crisis to change our habits and thereby change our future. So those are some of the things that I wanted to share today. I have a few other great entrepreneurs who are going to be able to present today afterwards, dialing in from New York, Denver, and Canada, presenting some of their exciting technologies around electric vehicle charging, energy monitoring, and heat recovery. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been great, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Wade. A lot of great insights and tips. I know many of the audience have smart city related questions, and we will save those questions to the panel discussion and Q&A session. Let's enter this company presentation session. First, we will welcome Joachim. Joachim is joining us from New York. He's the founder of M-Control. M-Control is an AI-powered optimization software for EV charging networks to install more charging stations at lower cost. So let's welcome Joachim.
Perfect. Hi. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to say a little few words about our company, about what we're doing right now, what we have doing before COVID, what we're doing after COVID. It's definitely something I've never seen before, of course, as many others. So I'm happy to share also my ideas on this. Before going on to this, I would love to share what company is doing, what we are doing. So M-Control is really a software for optimization of electric vehicle charging. And what we are normally looking at is something like this. We see usually a big amount of electric vehicles trying to charge at one location. In that case, as you might already see, it's delivery vehicles or some kind of fleet vehicles, but it could also be workplace charging, residential charging, any type of vehicle, even such as buses, trying to charge at specific locations. And this is something in smart cities which, from our perspective, has pushed a lot of new things into the market, has driven a lot of new projects in cities and governments, such as incentives and new ways of transportation. But besides of the now fast growing market of EVs and chargers, something what companies and governments often forget is that these vehicles and these chargers at the end need energy. And what we are seeing at M-Control is that the electric grid, how it was designed the past years, is technically not designed for electric vehicles. So we are looking at the total costs when someone installs and operates charging stations. And more precisely, we're looking at companies who are doing this. So charging point operators, car manufacturers who want to sell solutions, or even fleet operators who want to install big numbers of chargers. And if you look at typical operation and installation of chargers, you see that 85%, so the majority of costs are usually not coming from the charging station. And this is where we come in. So we see this as a big hurdle for companies to actually grow faster. Let's say a charging point operator has developed a great system, but is now facing high capex costs when they want to extend their network. Or a charging an EV manufacturer who maybe is now on the second or third generation of their vehicle, such as a van or a bus, is ready to scale, but his customers, such as fleet operators like transit companies, cannot buy so many vehicles at one time because they need to figure out how to charge so many vehicles at the same time. So how we come in is that we are using optimization here to reduce the cost of charging and increase the sales of our customers. So we're using AI-based optimization software to generate for each charging event individual charging commands. So imagine that once a bus arrives or a van or an EV at a workplace charger, that our software can identify which vehicle needs to charge first and which one maybe needs to charge later based on the state time, required energy amount, and so on. And of course, each use case is very, very different. It can imply fleet optimization, such as routes and numbers of miles a vehicle needs to drive, but can maybe also look at a pattern of an employee who comes every day at 10 o'clock in the morning and leaves maybe at 6 p.m. So all these things are important for optimization. And things what we usually do is, and what we have done a lot, we have analyzed for our customers, how does actually prices and peak power influence the cost of the total cost, CapEx cost and CapEx cost of networks. So one example what we did is we analyzed an entire network from one entire year and analyzed 90,000 charging events and try to find out, is there actually potential to reduce the costs? This was something we did once because a customer asked us, hey, can you actually give us an indication about the potential? And in that case, we found out that he was technically able to reduce 30% of the costs and then helping, of course, customers to reduce his costs. And the main reason here is very simple to explain, is we identified that the stay time of some vehicles were very long overnight, very long during the day. Not each charging station had the same stay time, so we could identify which charging station specifically actually has this flexibility. And we could then help him to make a decision on his strategy. So now the question is, how is COVID impacting this industry today and also in future? And when I asked this question myself before coming to this discussion today, I had to think a little bit, because we are right in the middle of this COVID, so it's really hard to say what will come in the future. How will the world change? Is it going to change at all, or is it a short-term change right now based on media and government? Or is it really something which will influence the next 10, 20 years? But then I made the first small step and looked at, okay, well, how did it change actually today, our business? And of course, we don't see as many vehicles driving around as usual. So we will not see as many charging events on chargers. I don't need a simulation for this. But at the same time, I'm talking to a lot of companies who are doing following things, who are managing buses. And as we see in New York, the MTA is, of course, operating as good as possible. With the numbers of hurdles they have to do with cleaning and problems with like getting enough staff, but they need to operate properly. And this is one of the crucial things I think in smart cities. Like these transit companies, they have to operate every day, even though it's a crisis, because they need to bring people from A to B. And then the second type of customers or companies we are seeing is delivery companies. So this could be FedEx, UPS, or USPS or DHL, but they need to operate super precise, need to be very careful on how they manage the entire operation. So also here in both cases, buses and these kind of delivery vehicles, we see that the biggest problem in future we are going to see with after COVID, also during COVID, is if you want to electrify these kind of operations, it's not only about charging the vehicle or being able to install the charging station. It's about that the vehicle itself and the charging process is not influencing the entire operation. So it should not impact the stability of an operation. So FedEx should not worry about that his battery might only be 80% fully charged and not 100%, or that maybe the wrong vehicle is fully charged, so the driver needs to wait 30 minutes before he can leave, or that companies like IKEA cannot deliver the goods because the vehicle is not fully charged. So this is something which we will see a lot in future, because COVID shows us that these companies need to be running at any time. So how we changed a little bit in our company, and what we're doing a lot more than before, is we're helping companies in their decisions, and especially not about showing them how we can reduce costs, as I showed before, but how can we actually increase reliability. So we really try to help them making decisions based on data. And I just brought 2 examples from really recent simulations, one we just finished today, which shows really that managed charging is not only reducing costs, it's actually helping to maintain and having a really reliable operation. So in that case, we analyzed what does it mean if I want to charge 50 vehicles at one location. So the first goal was, of course, charging them fully, that everyone has his battery fully charged at the end. But at the same time, we have these high costs, and maybe it's not even possible to charge them. Or what happens if the public grid cannot deliver at this time as much power as possible, and using demand response to reduce the power. So we need backup power from batteries. So what we did is here building up a scenario of a real scenario what could be deployed technically at any time, and showing then customers how they can use stationary batteries inside the fleet to really maintain operations for delivery and buses, for instance. And the same with the second example, showing the same procedure, but on a lot bigger scale. So we took here more than 500 vehicles. More precisely, it's around about 600 vehicles we try to charge within 10 hours. And we had here the frame that we need to charge this vehicle fast, but also be able to maintain the vehicles during the night. Means, how can we charge 600 vehicles within 10 hours at one location, not being too expensive, means not having a huge grid capacity requiring from utility, but at the same time allowing a vehicle being maintained during these 10 hours. And also to not using 600 chargers, maybe only 300 chargers, 150 chargers. So there's always kind of circumstances we need to look at. So this is just one part of the simulation, just showing a little bit that we were able to reduce, in that case, the power demand significantly. So they had an idea, they had the assumption that we will need around about 5 to 6 megawatt of power at this location, and we were able to charge all vehicles overnight in the simulation by using only 3.7 megawatt. And moreover, we barely used the power on the chargers, so we didn't require 100 kV DC fast chargers. Most of the time we were between 10 and 20 kilowatt. Only very few times we got actually to the 50 kilowatt. So this is something we found out. We were doing this day to day to develop our product, to test our modules, to find out which works well and which doesn't work well, to not deploy something which might not work well in real case. And then we found out during this COVID crisis that we can actually use them to help companies making decisions based on data. So yeah, I think I really just tried to show you a little bit on what we're doing and how we changed a little bit our approach. In some cases, of course, we still focus fully on operating and on implementing managed charging for companies. But I think we found a good way to help companies also in this specific crisis using our software.
Thank you very much, Joachim. And I see you have put a lot of thoughts to the COVID-19, post-COVID-19 world.
I'll try to.
Yeah, and next, we will save questions for you to the last panel discussion session, and I encourage all of you in the audience to post your questions in the chat window so that the panel can address later. And next, let's welcome Dan. Dan is joining us from Boulder, Colorado, and he is the CEO of Cooper Labs. Cooper helps utilities take control of energy demand by engaging consumers with real-time meter data. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Dee, and thanks, folks, for having me. Sorry, I'm a little dark here in my office. I should have come up with a better lamp, but hopefully the information will be interesting enough. So, as Dee mentioned, we help utilities take control of energy demand. We do it with a low-cost piece of hardware that utilities can simply mail out to consumers. Consumers easy self-install. Once it's connected, it streams wireless real-time data from electric, gas, and water meters. And so it's interesting for consumers, and it's interesting for utilities because we create a channel where utilities can engage the right consumers when it matters most to the grid, because it's really expensive to serve unexpected peaks in demand. And, to the point of the conversation that you've been hearing, COVID is most assuredly going to impact this. And so you've certainly noticed some of these headlines. I think a lot of folks were already worried about how distributed energy resources were affecting the grid. And with the onset of COVID, we've spotted 3 really specific challenges. One is additional pressure on residential feeders, particularly as the summer season comes on. You can imagine a lot of folks turning on air conditioners while they're charging their car, while they're potentially doing laundry, instead of having that at an isolated commercial facility where that load is more predictable. And so how do you see what that's going to look like? How do you engage those consumers? The other is that in-home services for utility energy efficiency programs have ground to a halt for obvious reasons. I don't think any of us are inviting folks into our home just yet. But these utilities still have these challenges, still have these budgets. And then the third piece is how is it going to affect the actual duck curve? This is a big problem in areas like California in particular. And so because we have access to so much real-time revenue grade meter data, we took a look at some, and we ran this comparison of what did it look like both before the lockdown and then after. And so on the graph on the left, it's pretty clear to see the average daily demand is spiking much higher than it would because more folks are at home. If you look on the right side, it's where it gets really interesting relative to some of these duck curve challenges. If you're not familiar with duck curve, for individuals with rooftop solar during the day, their energy demand really comes down. But as the sun goes down and they continue to use load, it spikes demand on the grid. And if the utilities don't have a way to see that to help communicate with those consumers to manage those loads, they're going to fire up gas peaker plants and do a whole lot of other expensive things to address those issues. And so the mantra of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it has never been more true. And so that's why we do what we do. The thing that makes Copper unique is that we support both smart and drive-by meters on a single piece of hardware across electric, gas, and water. So if you are a drive-by utility such as we have with XL Energy here in Colorado, they access their meter data once a month. Consumers get to see that data once a month, typically through their paper bill. With Copper, we get that down to every 30 seconds. And for smart meters, it's a pretty similar scenario. Even the most sophisticated smart meter deployments rarely provide consumers or the utility with access to real-time data. Most would ask a consumer to go out to a web portal, look at yesterday's 15-minute interval data. If you can engage me right now in the moment with something that's actionable and personalized, there's a good chance that I'll take action on that. And so the opportunity for Copper is to help drive-by utilities bridge the gap to smart grid services, help already in a way that's future-proof, because again, we've already got a radio in here for smart meters as well. So if that meter gets swapped out, we simply flip on that radio. And so it's interesting because even though we sell only to utilities and related partners, we have to make it really easy for consumers to install this. And so when it shows up in the mail in a little cardboard box, the consumers simply have to go download a mobile app that can be branded for utility, connect Copper to their Wi-Fi, snap a photo of their meter, and we take care of the rest. We have proprietary machine learning algorithms that figure out how to read each meter down to near real time overnight, understand the patterns of each individual so that we can alert that consumer when those patterns change. And so once Copper's set up for a consumer, they're going to interact with our data through mobile apps or voice skills. We partnered with XL Energy to build the only voice skill that leverages real-time meter data. So not just asking, how to pay my bill, but how much energy am I using right now? Is now a good time for me to charge my EV? And one of the other key trends that is particularly relevant right now during COVID is as more folks are at home using more energy and increasingly, having less income, bill alerts are really interesting. If you were on a drive-by meter like we have here in Colorado, you wouldn't know until you get that bill that you just went over $200 for the month. And so that real-time personalized insight, anomaly detection to let you know that you're making energy consumption choices that might not be good for your economics or the grid is exactly what we're here to do. For utilities, they interact with our data through APIs or a web application called a utility portal. And I'll show you a quick live demo of this in a minute, but it's unique because it plots on a map real-time energy loads across fuel types and provides utilities with an opportunity to, engage targeted users and then measure the impact both in the app and at the meter. And because we're getting revenue grade wireless data directly from the meter, meaning the same data they would use to send you a bill or report to regulators, it helps utilities to assess the performance of these programs. And so you can imagine, as the example shows, hey, I see you're charging your EV during peak hours. If you could wait until after 9, you'll pay half as much. And so, whatever the appeal is, whether it's economic, a sense of environmental stewardship, or simply geeking out on energy data, there's a lot of information here for those consumers. And because we've talked about smart cities additionally, I wanted to give you an example case study, and then I'll show you what energy loads look like in this community in real time. So we partnered with Siemens and Xcel Energy on a smart city project here in Colorado called Sterling Ranch. Siemens is the systems integrator installing everything from sprinkler controllers to video security. And they were interested in a way to cost effectively deliver real-time electric, gas, and water meter data to their residents. And so copper effectively replaced a big panel on the wall, probably the size of the art you see behind me, for a fraction of the cost. Xcel then subscribes to our data services to engage consumers of that community in a behavioral demand response program that to date has been focused on reducing peak loads during hot summer days. But let me flip to the utility portal, and I will show you what that looks like. And hopefully it's going to pull up, but you're going to see a map view. And so this is Sterling Ranch, the community that I just mentioned. And these are real-time loads. We've got it in privacy mode, so you can't see individual addresses, but each one of these is a home with multiple different meter types. And so right now we're showing you real-time electric consumption. We can also show real-time rooftop solar generation. Of course, the sun has gone down here, and so you can't see much, but we're always going to show actuals relative to a rolling average. And so you can pretty easily infer what happened today. Pretty normal sunny day, and then the cloud cover came in. This kind of information is increasingly important to utilities because they don't have access to it. And when consumers go from consuming energy based on what they've generated to pulling from the grid unexpectedly, it puts new pressures on the grid. Additionally, natural gas is a big issue, particularly in the Northeast. And so copper on a single piece of hardware can support multiple different meter types, a mix of smart and drive-by on the same platform. This particular community, we're also the source of record for water billing data. And they use water differently, they have different rates, pardon me, different rates for indoor water consumption and outdoor water consumption. So they'll be doing effectively water-based demand response because here in the West, we are certainly prone to drought. But whether a utility wanted to come in and target an individual and see exactly how they're using energy, water, gas relative to their averages and say, hey, you're doing these things that aren't going to be good for your bill, or the utility wants to target a lot of folks in the community and call, for example, a behavioral demand response event, there's a couple of ways to filter here. And so if I go back to my grid electric, I'm already filtering geographically. I might want to say, you know what, I only want to focus on people that are using more than 4 kilowatt hours of energy right now, and you can target them. And so we have both a baseline comparison, meaning how am I doing relative to my average, and a randomized control trial, which effectively sends the message to half of the people. But these are interesting things for utilities that need measurement verification data. But you can just go through the flow, select what the message you want to be, pick who you want to engage, schedule when the event should be, and when you finish this flow, which I won't do because it's real-time data, it'll send a push notification through our mobile app to consumers. And then for utilities, the important part is being able to go back and measure that, as I mentioned. So I'll pull up an example here, and this is my last bit before I'll pass it over to Gray. This is a behavioral demand response event that we ran with Xcel Energy last summer. It draws a box around all the individual homes that were included in the event. And if my Wi-Fi catches up with me here, it's going to show you what the average consumption was for those homes, and then what the actuals were during the event. And in the case of this one, it shows that we were able to curtail loads by about 3.5%, simply by asking the consumers to take some action. Of course, there's a lot of flexibility for utilities here to say whatever they wish, to offer incentives, etc. But that is our end-to-end solution, and we are in the right place at the right time to help utilities solve these problems, both for their infrastructure costs and for their consumers, because it's a challenging time for a lot of people, and if you don't have visibility into what you're doing and what the impact might be, it's pretty hard to make informed decisions. So with that, I'll pause. We'll look forward to some questions later on, and over to you, Gray.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Dan. I think copper will be needed by more and more households as people are staying home more. And also, I noticed my utility bills went up quite a bit during the past 2 months. So it's spot on. Next, let's welcome Gray. Gray is joining us from Canada. He is the VP of Project Development at Terrapin. Terrapin is a designer and developer of industrial heat recovery project. Welcome, Gray.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me out, and for everybody to sit in and listen to us talk about our companies. I've got a bit of a 5-minute video on Terrapin, just to give you an introduction to who we are corporately, and then I'll go into a little bit of detail on how we were affected through this, or what we've seen the effect of this COVID crisis has been. Thank you for having me out. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to showcase Terrapin Geothermics. Because of the time allotted, I'm only going to present the waste heat side of our business at Terrapin. If you're interested in learning about the geothermal side, please reach out. We've recently secured almost $25.5 million in non-dilutive federal funding from the Canadian government, and we are currently raising into the project. But now I want to talk about our waste heat business. So let's start with the problem Terrapin wants to solve. We've narrowed our focus in on the staggering amounts of waste heat lost globally every year. Now, I do want to say that I will never claim that we can capture all this waste heat. It's just not possible. But there is a significant chunk of waste heat that does present the proper metrics for direct heat use or heat to power developments. While one of the more efficient uses of waste heat is to use it as direct heat, there's a limitation to how far we can move that direct heat from its original waste heat source. So while we do focus on developing direct heat use opportunities, converting your waste heat into a baseload emission-free converted power source really unlocks its value, as that power can reach markets miles away now. Terrapin's goal is to help create value from this previously wasted resource. We want to partner with industrial facility owners around the globe to pay them for access to their waste heat resources, where Terrapin can develop independent heat to power and direct heat use facilities. Ultimately, we are one of those rare ESG solutions that is trying to cut you a check and pay you versus the other way around. So where does Terrapin stand in this process? Our opinion is that waste heat recovery is not new by any means. I mean, there have been waste heat to power technologies around since the 80s, and direct heat use is just piping and heat exchangers, which we know pretty good. So ultimately, Terrapin is innovating the development and delivery of waste heat recovery projects, whether above ground at industrial facilities or miles below our feet in geothermal formations. Terrapin's role as the linchpin is to identify potential waste heat opportunities and align all the key project stakeholders required to develop and invest in profitable clean energy projects. There are generally 4 key project stakeholders involved in these developments that you can see here. But Terrapin doesn't just want to bring the key project stakeholders to the table. We want to create value for these key project stakeholders. You will notice that the value prop differs between each project stakeholder. The point I want to highlight here is how much value Terrapin can unlock from a resource that was previously wasted. Terrapin has been at this since 2016 and has taken the last 2 years to specifically refine our research of the waste heat industry. And based on the metrics we require for power generation, we have identified gas turbines that operate on midstream natural gas turbines to be the most immediate opportunity to develop modularized and replicable waste heat to power facilities. It is also important to note that the oil and gas industry is facing constant societal pressure to innovate and adapt. Terrapin's waste heat solutions can help generate environmental attributes that can help lower the carbon intensity of your product and help keep you competitive. Another reason we identified gas turbines as a great waste heat to power resource is that there are not a lot of turbine manufacturers in the marketplace, so we don't need to adapt our modular design for hundreds and hundreds of different turbines. As you can see here, we have modeled the standard power output of each turbine. These are turbines we see a lot of in the marketplace, and they are rarely sold with waste heat recovery technologies. As I mentioned, we have done significant due diligence into what the global market thinks about waste heat capture. Our tier 1 projects in development is our geothermal project, and we have 4 other projects near sign-off that we cannot put logos to just yet due to NDAs. Our tier 2 projects are comprised of waste heat resource owners who have gone as far as NDA and data transfer so Terrapin can size the prize of the potential opportunity, and conversations are ongoing. I specifically want to highlight the last section here. As I initially pointed out a couple slides ago, our initial market focuses in the midstream gas turbines. But this last category here represents the runway for our growth opportunities in new industries. And we have 2 to 5 to 10-year growth plans for the opportunities that lie in this category as well. Who has gotten Terrapin here? And who is going to lead us going forward? Well, it's our specialized and industry-tested team that we have compiled to help solve our clients' waste heat to power and direct heat use or geothermal development needs. I'm proud to work with them and would love to introduce you to them all someday. We've been backed by the support of many prominent industry associations and programs that you can see here. And I want to thank Plug and Play for having me on today. And I cannot say enough of good things about our experience with them. Of course, you can't end a pitch without an ask. Terrapin is actively in search of clients, along with partners interested in debt financing, equity ownership in our projects, or direct investment into Terrapin. Thank you so much for allowing me to present Terrapin, and please reach out if there is interest. So that's just a quick introduction on Terrapin, just to give you an idea of what we've been working on. Obviously, we're not at the consumer fingertips like Joachim and Dan are, but based on our conversation with the post-COVID lens that we're trying to put on this, the conversations we've been having with the municipalities, for example, a lot of municipalities here in Canada have been approaching us to diversify their energy mix. Industrial facilities are becoming a lot more, are wanting to do a lot more behind the fence generation. They're becoming a little more worried about intermittency supply from the grid. And those utility operators as well, we've been approached by them, and they're quite interested in that base load power mix within their grid, especially when it comes to geothermal as a renewable base load source. As they're making these carbon neutral commitments, they become very big parts of the conversations, I think, in this post-COVID world as well. And lastly, I think there's going to be a lot of infrastructure dollars that are going to be flowing into the energy industry that are going to help support the smart cities concept and just the energy transition in general.
So do you have more to share, Gray?
Nope, I'm good on my end.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Gray, for the sharing. And let's get into the panel discussion session. And we will welcome all of our guests back. Hi again. And I see, let's make sure you are all unmuted. Okay, great. So I see, first of all, thank you very much for all the insights and the tips. So for the panel discussion, I see there are questions in the chat window that are quite interesting. Why don't we just go from there? And one question I'm seeing here is, what's the biggest challenge and opportunity we're facing in the development of smart city? And since all of you are in the panel are part of the smart city effort, I think this is a question for all of you.
I mean, one thing I would say, I think Joachim pointed out, we're in the middle of it right now, so it's kind of hard to see where this is going to all finish. I think we're all trying to just try to learn as we go and move as nimble as or move as quickly as possible to try to react to where the final goalpost is going to be at the end of this crisis.
Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, not only the COVID-19, but there are also many opportunities faced by a smart city, right? Yeah, and challenges.
Yeah, from our perspective, we're obviously in the data business, but we see instrumentation of these buildings and all of the infrastructure around them as something that obviously mandates good connectivity. As you have a smart city that's leveraging batteries to charge a bunch of cars. If you can't see that holistically together, I find that these are much more expensive projects to deploy, where you're doing a piecemeal where someone's focused on a bit, rather than a holistic strategy that's governed from a top level objective where everything's integrated, everyone has a common view of the infrastructure, what the reality of it is, what's working and what's not. And again, a lot of folks just don't have a good way to measure these things in real time.
Yeah, and I think something what we need to keep in mind, a lot of cities have already made really good steps becoming smarter. So they're already using data to make decisions in transportation and healthcare, or even to commit to prevent crimes. What we need to be careful, and I think what COVID shows a little bit is once patterns change, let's say people go out less or have different kind of lifestyles, that any kind of smart system needs to react automatically. And today we are, I think, at the first level, which means it's more automation and there's some reaction happening. But it becomes very difficult already today for systems to react on complete new patterns. So I think observing how ACs are now running in summer is a potential risk, definitely, for utilities. So if in future we want to have smarter cities, all systems should be designed to either remotely change decision-making processes, but ideally the systems are so smart or smart enough that they can actually change themselves based on patterns and adapt based on patterns. It's incredibly complicated, but it's definitely possible and something we should try to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I may just add one quick thing here, there's, as I kind of briefly mentioned, and we see here, there are a lot of opportunities here in this space, but I feel like we're the future cities of hyper-connected, data-driven, and digital solutions are going. We're going to see a number of opportunities around creating cybersecurity and safety around data. And we see a number of technologies that are implementing their solutions citywide across the world. And I mean, that we have a certain practice that just focuses on those areas. And on the challenges, I would say regulations are not moving as fast as the technologies are. A lot of these technologies will be, adopted much more faster if the regulations allow them to. So I think there's a lot of work to be done as these technologies improve. So the regulators and policymakers should catch up. I think those are some of the bigger challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, and that's gonna take time, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Also, yeah, here's a very interesting question. So shifting from the workforce to work from home and moving more workload to cloud computing, how can we trace the electricity consumption pattern change and evaluate the impact to green energy source? Yeah, I think we saw from the news that Twitter just announced they will allow all employees to work from home indefinitely. And Facebook just announced today that they will also allow working from home till 2021. So I think this is a very, very good question. Do you have anything to share?
It's an interesting question, and maybe for some young companies not that obvious that it could come to a challenge. For instance, I mean, of course, we all work on clouds. We never had anything stored or working locally. But if you have really really powerful systems, or a lots of workforce work together locally at specific locations. And suddenly you have a complete shift, and you change from local strong computers such as architects or designers to cloud-based systems, and suddenly working from home. You have a shift in two ways: one to data centers, of course, but also a shift to your homes. I think to your homes it's easier to identify from my perspective, because it's something we're used to do, and which is really not publicly available, but easily available for many more companies. But there's also going to be another shift, like a second wave of cloud computing for all companies who have never worked with cloud computing before, such as architects or designers who have used the benefits of strong local hardware, now shifting to strong cloud computing. But identifying this is definitely challenging, but it will be possible, and it's probably not as critically in fact impacting the utility grid as moving to homes.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, I see this is a very related question to your company as well. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I was reading an article today about, I think it was Google optimizing their data centers to be smart enough to maximize consumption of renewables. And I think, you know, it really speaks to the question here that a lot of folks are asking in our industry: are we going to seize this moment to make real changes? And you know, you could surmise that the folks running those data centers, you know, a lot of them are these big companies like Twitter, like Google, who are increasingly will be reducing their office loads. And so, you know, my hope is that by having so much additional load come off in those offices, that they apply more attention and perhaps budget to accelerate the move toward renewables. You know, there's a lot of talk now with, you know, oil prices being where they are, that it's a great time to pull the subsidies and actually, again, take advantage of this moment. And so I see data centers as, you know, you could certainly look at it from what's the data center load, which is, I think, obviously a massive electric load, down to the consumer level, which, you know, is probably less impactful. And so I would, you know, even though it doesn't serve my interest as a business, I think the big opportunity is in encouraging these big data center operators to take advantage of this time and move to renewable.
Mm-hmm. Great. And here, also a lot of audience from their registration, there is this question. So what's this one piece of advice you would like to share with the startups for coping with COVID-19 after we're opening, or you know, even during this time?
I'll keep going since I was just talking. I was asked this question recently, and my response was, you know, two things: make sure that before you get into an early stage startup, that you, number one, pick something that you and your team are uniquely capable of doing. You know, we've got a bunch of meter nerds that have been solving wireless stuff, and so naturally we do that. But importantly, people that you actually enjoy spending time with, because you spend a lot of time with these folks, and when things like COVID come up, you know, times get hard. It's, you know, we're doing fine as a business, and it's extremely stressful. It's stressful for everyone. And so I would say it's a good lesson is to choose very wisely those individuals you want around you, and that extends from you know, not only your team, but your investors, your advisors, and even the kinds of customers that you work with, because you know, startups are certainly fun, but they are not easy, and times like this shine a real light on that.
Yeah, I agree, Dan, and you also said customers, and there are different types of customers. I think some react differently to crisis than others. What we saw here, and my advice really is, which I had to learn as well, I think, in the past month, is to change also conversations you have with customers. For instance, what we tried is we try to trigger conversations, and you have different ways to do it as a company. What we did and how we did it is sharing a lot more insights on our current thoughts and on current R&D projects we're doing, side projects maybe, or just ideas on for instance, simulations, what I showed before. And this triggered a big amount of discussions with companies we already were in discussions, or who were our customers, but also with complete new with new companies. So just sharing a little bit more information about maybe things that you're not providing right now, or you're using by yourself, but maybe it's really exciting and you want to share it. It maybe triggers to a conversation that leads later to a project, maybe with a company, or just to complete new project ideas or business ideas. And I think this is something I really want to advise to startup companies and people who are working there, that sharing insights is not always harmful and a risk. It can actually really mean a lot to customers, and then build up a really strong trust and better relationship during these times.
Mm-hmm.
And to build on that too, like for us, it's leveraging the partnerships and the relationships that we had previously established as well within the industry. You know, whatever your network is, your industry peers or the customer base or any advisors, really lean on that network, ask a lot of questions, collaborate a lot within that industry. And the other one, I think coming out of this, there's probably going to be a bit of a boom in terms of opportunity that's out there. And the big thing that's been driven into me from a lot of advisors is focus, focus, focus. You'll probably have a lot of opportunities within your business to go chase a lot of RFPs, a lot of, you know, grants and this. Really take a hard look within your business and figure out where your focus is best trained, and go after those opportunities.
That's a good one.
Yeah, if I may add maybe a couple of things. Obviously, there's a lot of great questions that are coming in, and in the interest of time, I'll just add maybe one or maybe 2 points added to what Joachim and Gray and Dan mentioned. I think entrepreneurs are optimists by nature, so they always believe that the economy will pick up very faster than it actually will. When you look at the past, a lot of these downturns, maybe not the pandemics, but others that have happened, didn't really pan out as they planned. So I would say try to understand what you have control over and what you don't. And one of the things that you don't have control over is fundraising. A lot of the investors don't have to make investments, and obviously they didn't all of a sudden, you know, run out of money. They still have to make these investments, but they will wait for the market to play out and see what businesses thrive. So in terms of fundraising, try to you know, budget on what you already have and try to double the amount that you used to plan for. Versus counting on the new money that you would probably have to raise. And you know, in the industries that you're targeting, like especially for Gray here, you know, when you talk to the oil and gas companies where they're cutting headcount by 30%, you know, investing in new technologies may not be the bleeding edge for them. So really, if you're targeting an industry that's suffering very hard, even if your business is growing, you're probably going to face a lot of challenges. So maybe worth exploring some of the other adjacent verticals that are still, you know, seeing healthy margins. But there's a lot of other interesting things, and you know, good questions for each individual here. So I'll try to turn it back to you.
Yeah, sure. I see there's a question for Joachim. So the question is from the perspective of EV charging companies. What great utility need to do work friendly with more and more EV chargers in the future?
Okay, I'll try to understand the question. I guess it's pointing out how the utility themselves are working with EV charging networks or EV charging hardware companies. I mean, it sounds really negative, to be honest, the question. So there are different kind of ways how utilities have worked in the past, and how I see it's working sometimes very, very well. And sometimes they are, of course, having problems with rates, structure, and demand response, and demand charges, and so on. There are 2 ways of solving it. The first way is that the charging company themselves get involved with utilities very, very early on. For example, if they build a new site, to get very early on from feedback from utility asking, hey, I want to install 50 chargers. Is this possible? Is this grid capacity available at this connection? So they can plan properly. Also, utilities should make or should motivate companies doing this. What I've seen a lot is projects either being delayed or budget was suddenly 30–40% higher because our utility needed to spend $500,000 for make-ready costs. This is one part, and then the second part is if the rates and price structures are not feasible for EV chargers and are harming the growth of EV charging networks, that's the worst thing you want as a utility. And it's not easy to change because it's very often regulated, especially in the US. So there it will take time, unfortunately, from my perspective. The only way how utilities can really help here, and this is something I've been missing a little bit from some parts, is really aggressively helping customers to finding ways to reduce costs if they have cost problems. Especially if you imagine now companies, let's say EVgo, who has a DC fast charger network, and they're of course paying demand charges. If they have one person charging at one charger, they only earn through the kilowatt hours, but have to pay the full kilowatt demand charges. And this can be very painful for a company, and also in this COVID crisis. And here they can use technologies, and utilities can really help introducing technologies and solutions and actually reducing costs and making it easier for EV charging companies. I hope it answered the question.
And here's a related question for you, Joachim. And how is your offer different from Ampli or Ampli? Ampli,
so the difference is pretty straightforward. I haven't really talked about it too much, so fair question. We specifically work with charging point operators and car manufacturers. So we don't usually address directly the fleet operator. We help companies to actually provide solutions. So the clear differentiation is that we are providing the technology, are not solution provider as Ampli.
Thank you. Hope that addressed your question, Ke. And here's a question for Dan. Regarding your business model, is the utility helping pay for customers to install co-pair sensors? And the second question is, are you able to qualify the direct saving impact? Has the utility achieved in example you illustrated? Yeah.
Sure. So to the first question, we only sell to utilities. And so in some cases, they would put this into a marketplace and let a consumer buy it with a subsidy. But our core business is real-time demand management. And it's a sufficiently expensive problem for utilities that the utilities fund this directly. The good example of how they do this today is through connected smart thermostat programs for residential consumers, meaning you can probably go to your utilities marketplace and they'll either give it away to you or give it to you at a discount if you'll further let them reach in and turn down your thermostat on hot summer days. They'll give you bill credits, other types of incentives. Copper's in a similar model of real-time demand management, albeit for the whole home, beyond the constraint of the 15% of the US homes that actually have a smart thermostat. We see other big loads, real-time rooftop solar generation, EV charging. And so it opens up a big opportunity, and we're selling into existing utility budgets. And so for the most part, consumers wouldn't need to pay for this. To the second question, yes, we absolutely quantify the savings, and it's part of why we get the data directly from the meter. And so the reads that we get are the same reads that a utility would use for sending you a bill. And so we have two ways of doing that. One would be just a comparison to the individual's baseline, which in the case of the Excel demo that I would have shown you had my Wi-Fi not been so bogged down with the Zoom, it shows what the actual curtailment was relative to the average baseline of all those users who participated in the event. And so that's all the M&V or measurement and verification data that a utility would need. One of the things that we're deploying now is randomized control trials, so that when a utility pushes that button and sends you the note saying, hey, I'd like you to do X for Y, it sends that message only to half of the users in whatever the geographic or other filter you've applied, so that you've got a sort of control in a variable group to see, did it actually help them to get these messages? And so it's a core part of playing in these utility programs that you have to quantify the impact of them. And so we're expanding the program, for example, that I showed you with Excel this summer and next. And we sure hope to be publishing a case study on that soon and sharing all the data publicly.
Great. Thank you very much for addressing this question. And I believe we are out of time. So Wade, Dan, Gray, and Joachim, thank you very much for your thoughtful, reasoned, and realistic insights today. And also thank you all in the audience for joining us. If you like our events, please be sure to tune in to our technical talk next Thursday and our Inspire Summit in September. For more information, please join us on our LinkedIn page and WeChat group and Slack channel. With that, thank you so much for watching, and please stay safe out there. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Dee. Bye.
It's great to see everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.